Good morning from the Environmental Learning Centers of Connecticut. My name is Lauren Pryor, and today we're here on the Indian Rock Nature Preserve. We're right next to our 10-acre lake, Indian Lake. And even though it's a little chilly this morning, we are kind of marching our way through spring here. We're getting a lot of sights and sounds back on the Indian Rock Nature Preserve that are kind of those telltale signs of springs. In the background here, we've got, in the background noise, since we're next to the lake, we've got a red-winged blackbird calling, we've got a red-winged male blackbird calling. They really like the, on kind of the corners of Indian Lake here, we've got kind of a swampy, big cattail section. They like to hang out there and establish their territories before the girls come up, some for migrating. But some sites we have on the Indian Rock Nature Preserve now that we're kind of getting our way into spring. When we look to the ground, we're seeing a lot of plants starting to grow. So kind of one of our early spring growers we have here, kind of popping straight out of the ground, a little curl. We have a fiddlehead, which is going to turn into a fern. And we've got a couple different varieties of ferns here. So Connecticut has just over a dozen different species of ferns. So we've got a few different examples. But those nice curls we know as fiddleheads. You can kind of see the leaf in there, the frond we would say, before it has uncurled. So our ferns are one clue that we're making our way through spring. Ferns are known as one of the world's earliest types of plants. So we have ferns on the ground. We'll check out some skunk cabbage on the ground. But then, of course, when we look to our trees, like right here, we have a yellow birch tree. We're starting to get a lot of buds on the tree. We'll get our camera to focus here. So our buds on the tree, buds of course come in all different shapes and sizes and colors depending on what tree they're growing on. Oh, we got our mallards landing in the lake there. But our yellow birch tree here is kind of coming out of its really slow state for the winter, right? It's a deciduous tree that has broad leaves. It sheds its leaves for the winter time to conserve water in the tree. So come springtime, the tree is going to start to push out nutrients from the soil and the water that it's getting, and it's going to start producing buds. So one thing we know that this yellow birch tree here, it's got very, very peely bark. Still a young tree, it's not that big diameter wise. But these, when we want to look at the branching pattern of this tree, we look to where the buds are growing. So we see on this tree, this yellow birch, we have kind of this alternating bud growth pattern. When we look at the leaves, when we're looking at the buds on this tree, alternating branch pattern means that there's one bud growing on one side of the branch, then the other, and then the other, and then the other. So we have alternating. Other branch patterns have to do with being opposite. So whatever happens on one side of the branch happens on the other side. But for our birch, we see an alternating pattern. So they kind of go up one side of the branch, the other side of the branch, other side of the branch. Okay. Especially when we talk about trees and IDing trees in early spring and in winter time, it's a little tough when you have bark, when you're just looking at bark. We know birch tends to have that peely bark with the horizontal staples. But when we get into our oaks and our maples, Sometimes the bark tends to look very similar to each other, so then we look towards the branching pattern. But since we're in spring, we're going to get those buds growing into leaves. So once this tree has some nice solid leaves on it, we'll be able to ID it using the leaves. And our birch tree is going to have a kind of elliptical type leaf. Nice and oval. Some sawtooth edges. And they don't get that big, maybe about 4 inches across. So our signs of spring, we have buds, we've got ferns growing. Here are those fiddleheads. And we're going to cross our little trail here and go to the other side of the woods. Because one very, very early plant that we have growing, kind of one of the first plants to pop up in early March, is the skunk cabbage. So our skunk cabbage has started to move on now that we're in late April. It started to move on from the space, that kind of egg shape, that purple-green egg shape. That looks like an alien egg coming out of the ground. And it's starting to grow its leaves. So the skunk cabbage is a very early plant. They can actually produce kind of their own temperature to melt the snow when there is snow on the ground. So they can be one of the earliest plants to pop up and break through the soil in very early spring. And the skunk cabbage is a flowering plant. It will grow flowers, and they are pollinated by beetles, other various insects, spiders a lot of the time, and flies. So when we think of flowers being pollinated, it's not just the bees that pollinate flowers. A lot of times it's whole loads of insects that will pollinate. So these skunk cabbage, they really like moist soil, really swampy conditions. And they have a ways to grow still. These leaves are pretty short, about 8 inches long, but they can go up to about 4 feet. So skunk cabbage, when they pop up as those purpley egg bulbs, those spades, we know spring is on its way. Now that we know spring is well on its way, as we've entered spring and we're kind of going through spring, the leaves have started to pop up. So as you're kind of enjoying your walk through the woods on your trail, or you're visiting a nature center like the Barnes Nature Center, which in the Barnes Nature Center, the trails are open sunrise to sunset 7 days a week. The building is closed right now, but we hope to have our reopening in May, in late May, so you can of course visit our website elcct.org to learn a little bit about our spring fair and the reopening of the Barnes Nature Center that we're very happy about. But on our spring fair, we're going to have loads of educational activities, like some trail hikes, so we'll be able to see at that time, since it'll be a month away, more and more plants starting to come back out as the temperature gets warmer. But it seems about 2 weeks ago, our ferns, our skunk cabbage has been out for a while, but it seems just about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, all of our ferns have started to poke out. So you can almost kind of watch their growth. If you have some in your backyard or a local park you'd like to visit, you can kind of follow their growth as the fronds of the fern will kind of uncurl themselves. And these ferns will get pretty large. These ferns can get about 3 feet tall with their long fronds. And then they're a great little spot for insects and spiders to hang out. The ferns will come up at the same spot each year. So the leaves each year will, at the end of the summer, as we're getting into fall again, the leaves will get cut off and die. But the system underneath the soil is still there, so the ferns come up in the same spot each year, and they reproduce using spores. So as we get further and further into the summer, when we flip over the fronds of the fern, we see they kind of have all of these little circular dots on the underside. And those are the spores they use to reproduce. Right. Other really solid signs of spring as you're coming through, of course, are your songbirds that are migrating back to your backyard or your local open space. So here on the Indian Rock Nature Preserve, we have the red wing blackbird, of course, which we can hear if we listen really well in the background. We have the mourning doves are coming back. We've got the Baltimore oriole, warblers. So there's loads of songbirds that are coming back, and they're kind of getting ready to make their nests and mate and raise their young for the spring. And of course, as each day passes, you know, it doesn't feel very spring today, but it'll feel like summer tomorrow with the warmer temperatures. We have our buds on the tree. So each tree will kind of have its own bud shape based off of what species it is. For our broadleaf trees, our deciduous trees, we know our conifers are needle-like trees, like all of our little bits of spruce on the ground. They've got their needles all year round. They've got a nice waxy coating, so they don't have to worry about conserving or having water loss throughout the winter time. So the signs of spring are a little small right now, as we're kind of having this fluctuation of warm and cold temperatures. But they are there and they are growing. So this is an excellent time of year to kind of take pictures of what is in your backyard or what outdoor resources you have closest to you, and you can take pictures and you kind of can document that plant's growth over time. You can hear the mourning dove in the background. We've got a woodpecker going. So it's a little bit of a quiet day here on the Indian Rock Nature Preserve, but we still have a few of our spring birds active and going. I'm sure tomorrow with the warmer weather it'll be much more lively. So as you're kind of taking your outdoor activities, remember we've been talking a little bit about leave no trace, so you can always kind of implement ways on to minimize your environmental impact while you are enjoying those outdoor spaces. But remember to slow down a little bit, and you can kind of get your eye on the plants and the animals that are returning back to your area for spring. If you slow down your nature walk, you might be a little bit surprised at what you find or what species are there. Okay. There's our red-winged blackbird in the background. So when you visit the Barnes Nature Center trails, take your time. It's an excellent spot to take a walk by yourself or with a friend or with a family. Slow it down on your trail walk to see what types of plants or evidence of animals are returning for spring as we kind of start to make our way towards summer. And then, of course, you can always go to our website, elcct.org, to get information about our upcoming spring fair on May 22nd, where we'll be reopening the Barnes Nature Center. Those ferns do start out small, but they do get very, very large. But we'll keep our eyes on these growing species in the weeks to come to see how they grow. Right now, for example, this fern is probably about 6 inches long. It's got a ways to go if it's going to get to over 3 feet. So we can kind of watch these plants as they grow in the coming weeks. We're going to be back on Thursday on the Environmental Learning Centers of Connecticut Facebook page at 10 a.m. So thanks for joining me today to take a little bit of a look at some of our early plant seed that are really starting to come out as we're making our way through spring. But thanks for joining me today, and we'll see you back on the Environmental Learning Centers of Connecticut Facebook page on Thursday at 10 a.m.